I know we need to bring this back, as Ivy mentioned, to the Black Lives Matter movement, and we can kind of segue into that. But, you know, I just kind of want us to think about this, like, seriously, honestly think about this. Like, even if we're worried about the fact that someone that's bisexual has multiple, a wider buffet or whatever, you got to also understand, as mentioned by Tash, it was that they have a lot more. And if they choose you, that should mean something, one. And two, if you're dealing with both, and I have tons of good sisters that have dated men and women and married women. And the truth of the matter is, we all people, and women ain't shit and men ain't shit sometimes, right? Like, they got double the issue then. Like, you got to deal with multiple people, because if y'all have been in a relationship, and I'm married, you can love that person all they want to, but people got problems. And cohabitating and living with people and trying to build a relationship with someone for an extended period of time is very difficult. I think we automatically consider bisexual, and we're already thinking they fucking somebody. They can be somebody that's bisexual that has love, that just, I love two people. Emotionally, I love a man, and I emotionally love a woman, right? And I don't want to have sex with them, because we tend to just automatically think that you screwing around. And my whole point is, okay, what if they are, right? As long as they keeping it safe, as long as they protect it, you can only control what you can control, right? And you can only have conversations with people and trust that if this person that you want to be with, you should be able to have open conversations and dialogues to be able to say, hey, look, man, you know, this is what it is. This is what I've done. This is what's going. This is how I feel about certain things. And if you feel like, oh man, like, what does that have to do if somebody has sex with somebody 10 years ago? Why has that ruined the entire goodwill that you've put and effort into this relationship? If you feel like, hey, well, look, it is just, you know, I just don't like it, then I'm uncomfortable. Like Joy had mentioned, why? Is it the thought of what they did? Do you feel like your body's all of a sudden going to be infected and polluted? Do you feel like it's because of HIV, AIDS? Like, what exactly is the reason? Because the reality is that you don't know anybody's history until they tell you. They tell you, and then and what y'all do together is what y'all are building. If you talk about wanting to build with somebody, then why should their past all of a sudden affect you, right? But I digress, because I know we got to shift it. But I do think that the conversation that we just had about this topic is very, very prevalent when it comes to debating what matters in a Black Lives Matters movement, because now we just talked about the whole fact that you have this inner quibbling in the Black community. We're talking about a long race that we're trying to run in order to achieve social justice and equality in the world, not just America. We still have all this inner fighting that by the time we figure out one issue after another, it's like me giving you a box of iPhone wired headsets. Have y'all ever tried to untangle them joints? It takes forever. Now, having just a whole box full of it that you have to untangle one at a time to straighten out. And by the time you're done with it, you find out that white people or whoever is ahead of us, miles and miles ahead of us, because we spent so much time trying to figure out one issue at a time, that unifying has become a lot more tedious. It's become a lot more just difficult and longer to solve, that making progress, we're moving in inches instead of yards. So we got to figure out how we can pick up the pace. What can we get rid of? What can we figure out quickly and move forward to becoming, or is it a situation where we deal with that stuff later? Let's just unify and defend each other now. And when we get what we want, we can start inner quibbling like white people do, because that's what they do. They come together, they get to where they want to go. And then once they get to their destination as far as progression, then they go through their inner quibblings and divides and they figure that stuff out. But if somebody else wants to come in and take what they got, they all come together and block that shit. They all agree. Europeans can all agree that Black people are beneath them. But when you talk about Europeans between each other, a Polish person ain't shit. So we have to be able to evolve our mindset to understand what's more important. What is our priority? And then we start to figure it out, because we're human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do different things. We're going to have, our preferences and all that. But we got to think about the big picture. We got to become a system in order for us to actually make change, y'all.
I feel like with Black people and LGBT people, I think someone made a point earlier as well about how there might be jealousy in a way of like how Black women can just kiss another woman and it's cool, but Black guys can't do the same. And I would argue that it extends even outside of the Black community. I feel like there is such a stress on people to conform to a one set way of thinking. When you can't express your I mean, we're sexual beings. Sexual energy is a powerful energy, right? When you can't express that in the many forms that it takes, because sexual energy doesn't just take one form, it takes so many different forms. When you're allowed to express it in its truest nature, when you're not allowed to express that, I feel like it creates like a really large depression. And I feel that is so prevalent in the Black community, because we're just not allowed to have sexual freedom and explore any avenues. You know, it's taught from the very beginning, this is not what you're supposed to do. So it creates this mad depression. And I feel that that's why suicide rates are so high in the Black community. I feel like that's why there's so much depression, because I'm not going to lie to you, there's so many other reasons as to why people are depressed, but I feel sexual freedom is a mad thing. I mean, there's guys that go into their 40s and they're gay their whole life, but they don't come out into their 40s. I can't think of any other situation that someone would contain a secret for so long until that age. And it's like this one thing that you can't speak about, you know? You can't speak about it, you can't express it. You get to 40, you've been depressed your whole life, and you look back and people choose to take their life. Some people choose to just let it go. But I feel like within the Black community, man, we just need to be able to normalize being free sexually, you know, and experimenting. And not everyone is gay, you know, not everyone is gay. It's not about trying to make or convince people that they are gay. It's just about saying that if you are, it's cool. It's not a big deal. It's not an issue. It's all right, you know, and allowing that person to go through that journey to realize that. So yeah, man. Because it's hard being gay and Black. Like, it's hard. Like, it's hard.
Hey.
Like me coming from the hood. Like, sorry to, I don't know, like, take over the conversation, but it's like, it's hard. Like, really, really is hard.
I don't know
It's
anyone
like,
who would willingly choose this, to be honest. I don't know anyone who would be like, okay, sign me up. If it was really about choice, shoot, I wouldn't choose this. I'd choose an easier route, most definitely.
Can I ask a question really quickly for Mr. Strange? So, you know, it's interesting because I want to know, as you mentioned that you're a rapper,
right?
Do you have to confine yourself into particular stereotypes of masculinity in order to be successful as a rapper? I think about, the reason I say that is for anyone who've ever watched the Boondocks. There's this Gangstalicious. There was this whole idea of this Black gay rapper and this perception of him having to be tough, but being in the closet. And people often say, oh man, I don't want to hear that gay shit, right? Like, so I'm just thinking about it, and I want to know from your perspective, do you have to pretend to be something else in order to be successful, or have you just naturally just been within your own self and spoke your truth about love or whatever you want to rap about?
From the beginning, in terms of like becoming myself in a way, like obviously I wasn't always out, I was in the closet for a long time, but in terms of rapping, that nah, not at all, man. I've always spoken whatever I want to speak about. After I come out, I was rapping before I came out, so obviously before then I was more confined, but once I come out and started rapping, yes, I just said what I needed to say. I mean, if you watch any of my songs or if you want to have a look at them, you'll see that anyway. But it's just, I don't believe in conforming, you know. If I would say a lot of the music I make would be deemed as masculine, but if I wanted to go and paint my nose tomorrow, that's what I'll do. And there's not really much the world is going to tell me about it, because we're all going to die one day at the end of the day, you know. So no one should have the power to control or dictate what you can and can't do in your life.
Okay, the second question I have is, how do you think we as a people can be taken seriously by our oppressors when we trying to protest for change, but we falter in consistency? We tend to march when somebody dies, but after 2-3 weeks, we stop.
I feel like that's kind of like a misconception right there, because people are marching every single day and the media is not showing it. Mm-hmm. Like, they only focused on the first couple riots just to show that they wanted to give like the Black Lives Matter a bad movement. But since then, every day there are marches. Every single day they're still going on.
Now after George Floyd had died, but before, like, the Black Lives Matter movement has been going on for a very long time. And it was always just stopping, going. I feel like now after coronavirus or during coronavirus pandemic, it has been taken a lot more serious because the entire world is moving now. Mm-hmm. But before, I felt like it was just a lot of inconsistency amongst us.
I think they stopped. I do agree. It appeared inconsistent. So I think that, yes, they were protesting and doing marches and stuff, but I also think that they were being active and proactive behind the scenes, whereas like trying to get laws changed or trying to actually make certain places better. So I don't think that they were more so in the streets loud with the bullhorns and everything like that, but I think that they were like coming up with strategies and actually trying to make actual change compared to holding the signs and everything. I think that's why we thought it was inconsistent. And again, like he said, the media representation is horrible. Portland has been marching nonstop, my Lord. Yep. So it got to the point I was like, why are they marching? Like, did a certain event happen there? Like, what the heck's going on? And then you realize, like, no, it's just still about Black lives. Like, they are not giving up. I just think, like you said, it's really the media. So, something else happened. Well, let's get their attention there. They never want to actually, the more we pay attention, the more we like, oh, this is a new organization. Let me donate. Oh, they doing this. Okay, let me pay attention to that. They don't want that. They don't want that. And we fall into the trap of it.
I believe personally that the only way to get what we're looking for and get the racial equality we're looking for is that needs to be another civil war. I believe that what we're asking for is literally the bare minimum. Like, we're literally asking for the bare minimum. Like, we're not asking for reparations. We're not asking for y'all to include us in everything that y'all stole from us. We're literally just asking for y'all to stop treating us like we're animals on the street. And because we're asking that, they're trying to dismantle everything about us. Like, they're hating Black people. That we're getting a lot of backlash. They're calling us I don't know if you guys know, but they're calling Black Lives Matter a terrorist organization in Houston, last month? Mm-hmm. And so for the fact that they're trying to play us to this level of magnitude, I feel like the only way to get their attention is by force.
I mean, I would just say that I think there's so many things that we have to keep in mind that hold us back. I think we've talked about the media and the effect it has as far as how it shapes the power of the movement. We're in a generation now where we're all about instant gratification, y'all. So I think we're essentially, the perception of many people is to immediately think that you're going to get a response. The truth of the matter is that every historical change that has happened throughout the course of time, people have marched for hundreds and hundreds of days. The civil rights movement in the 1960s was about hundreds of days worth of marching. It loses momentum and people are still getting shot. People are still getting killed, right? And they start to, the media shifts this focus to different things that it's all about the story to them, right? And telling the story that benefits them and their capital. But the truth of the matter is that the change it's about delayed gratification. We're going to have to continuously push, continuously march. And when it seems boring, this is when you keep pushing. For those people who work out, right? Like, you may reach a plateau, but that's when you got to push further in order for that change to happen. So I'm not going to disagree that there isn't this passiveness where things are like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter anymore. I think there's a larger system at hand. And I'm going to tell you this, when Black people really start to push the boundaries, that's when we don't have an FBI. We don't have a CIA. I'm speaking from an American standpoint, but all the great historical movement that had happened that could have changed the course of Black lives, there was always some type of systemic intelligence. And I'm not trying to go into that whole conspiracy shit, but I'm just saying, we don't have that type of intelligence. When Black people are gathering, they're about to put a movie out there on Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers. You saw FBI infiltrated that, found Black people to betray. Same thing with Malcolm X. The FBI infiltrated, get his own brothers to assassinate him. So that's why it's deeper than rap, right? There's so many interwoven systems that we are having achieved yet that when you start to push to those bounds, that's when they really bring out the real weapons. They have that power that we don't have yet. Aaron is saying civil war, and at first thought is shit, that shit is a little extreme. But the truth of the matter is, at what point do they hear us? You know what I mean? When are they going to see us? Do we have to burn shit down? And when we burn stuff down in Minnesota, you saw how they changed the whole perspective on what it is to be Black. When y'all taking down statues of slave owners all across the world, you see how they've shaped Black movements. Historically, it's always been Black people are violent. We have to, because the world has told us that as Black people, we were born to be submissive. We may not be born to be slaves anymore, but we are born to take what the world gives us. Even though we were the ones that built the world, we've been told to take what they give us. So anything that we do that speaks out against it is almost like when you backtalk your parents and your parents say, oh my God, are you trying to fight me? It's like, wait a minute, I'm not. I just want you to hear me, right? But it's that type of relationship where they want us to be, they don't want to hear us. And in order for us to be heard, we have to push beyond just you seeing us. Right? Because what they're doing now in 2020, now that we have social media and all this information, is they're painting Black Lives Matters on the road. Okay, that don't change nothing, right? Still arrest the killers of Breonna Taylor. What have you done to the people we don't even talk about Ahmaud Arbery, who got killed in February, jogging, right? You're rewarding our microaggressions with micro concessions. You're giving us Aunt Jemima. You're giving us Uncle Ben's rice. You're giving us TV shows that may have had blackface that we don't care about. It becomes patronizing to Black people because you make it seem like we're too dumb to understand how to tell the difference between when someone's being really racist and someone is just trying to put on a mask for their face, right? So that also in itself is insulting. We have to be able to push through that and say, no, like, that don't mean nothing to us. Black Lives Matter on the road ain't got nothing to do with us. We need policies to show that SATs getting us into higher professional schools don't need to be dictated by standardized tests that were created off of racial perspectives. Now, that in itself is an issue, right? Like, so, and there's so many other things among all that, right? Like, so in order for us to be heard, we have to be able to start addressing those things. But the system of racism is so brilliant. Like I said when in the other talk that I was in, the system is so brilliant, it's become a monster that feeds itself. We have education, we have jobs, we have health, we have all these other things that we have to worry about. At some point, I may have to agree with you, Aaron, like we might have to blow some shit up. Like, we have to start a civil war. We have to succeed. But we tried that in 1919. The Tulsa, we got killed in Tulsa. We're in a difficult position. Now, I don't want to sound hopeless, but we have to keep all these things in mind when we talk about why things are so passive. Many of us are scared. Many of us want to march, but none of us want to die for this shit, right? And that's the truth that no one wants to talk about.
The biggest difference in Tulsa in 1919 is one, I believe we have a little more right to assembly now. I honestly believe it's a little smarter now. And we as people are a little smarter. You can't give us the same stuff that you've been giving us. You can't tell us the same lies that the government's been, like, we're not falling for it. It's no more of like what the white man says go and that's the end of it. Everything is going to get backlash. Everything is going to get a push. However, the white man still controls the majority of everything. And the only way we'll be able, like, we need some of that money. They've been holding on for the last 100 years. We need some of that. We need office spots. They've been passing down to their kids and their grandkids of racist ideologies. We need those. But before we can do any of that, we need some type of group that's going to say, like, this is what we want, and there's going to be consequences behind if things don't happen. Because it's going on, month 3 of Breonna Taylor. They know exactly what happened. They know exactly what officers did it. And you can put it on every single NBA game, on the back of every single shirt. You can write Black Lives Matter on every single street, on every single road. But then none of that means shit. And if somebody was out here holding the police accountable, like, okay, and if police were dying at the same rate that black men were dying for no reason, change would have happened by now. If they would have got the dude who killed Zimmerman,
George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin,
George Zimmerman, they wouldn't have thought it was okay for that to happen to him. They let him go, and he's still walking freely. Stuff like that should not happen.
To bring it back to the question as to why we're so inconsistent, I just think it's because we just so all over the place. Mm-hmm. Really going back to when he was like the iPhone chargers wrapped up in a ball, us to the T. Mm-hmm. And then another point that you made too was like, we don't even know what the movement is for. We don't know. People read the statement, like you said, and they read Black Lives Matter. Yeah, I'm on that train. I am on that board. And then you're in it, and then you're realizing like, okay, well, we're trying to dismantle this. And it's like, I opt out. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like people aren't really knowing what they're signing up for. People aren't really ready to have these conversations. They're just reading the slogan, because I do think that they believe it's a slogan. And they're just trying to jump on board, but they don't have the right intentions. People aren't ready to be uncomfortable and have these conversations and actually be proactive to educate themselves. I think that we have a very short attention span because, like you said, when we aren't getting that instant gratification, it's like, well, woo, it's a long day of marching. We didn't get anywhere, but maybe next time. And it's just like, no, where is our fight? Where is our endurance? Where is it at? Where is that anger that lights us? And it's like when we actually come together and we hold hands and we figure this out, like you said, we can really take some shit over. Like we are literally having these conversations globally. And I don't think people really understand, like, you guys are in Ghana. I mean, from Ghana. You guys are in Germany. You guys are in London. If we all put on our social media, hey, on this day, we are doing this globally, that's taking a stand. That's actually showing that we can bond. We can do some stuff together. We just have to be on the freaking same page. And like you said, we'll figure out the rest later. I never want to discredit somebody else's struggle. I never want to dismiss somebody else's pain and what they're going through and their discrimination, by no means. But I'm going to grab your hand. We're going to figure that out when we get to this top. But right now, we need all of us. We need to all be on the same page, and we need to take this shit over.
Exactly.
I was just thinking about how the situation is in Germany and how great, but then also sad it is. I don't know that in the States, it's like Black people have been there forever. So I feel like you have more of a feeling of we have power, we have something to actually say in this country. But over here, like I said in the other talk that we had, that most of us are like first generation. We are still trying to figure out how to fit into Germany and trying to just be there and be Black and be here and try to get into higher places and try to just be accepted by people. Because there are people here who ask you like, oh my God, you're Black and you're German, you speak German, wow, that's great, your German is wonderful. Like, of course it's good, I was born here, I went to school in Germany. So people are still getting used to us. So it's super hard for the ones who actually understand how important it is to keep pushing and keep going with the whole movement. It's hard for us to get a lot of more Black people on board because, like I said, we're still trying to get accepted still. So yeah, it's kind of sad to see that it's like that. And it's also like nice to see that it can change. I feel like in the States, you guys at least feel like you could have some power.
I'll go back to what my bro Emmanuel had mentioned when the guys had talked. And I think the solution, and Emmanuel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I agreed with this so wholeheartedly because it's what I stand for as well. In order for us to be seen personally as Black people, I believe that we have to not be scared to connect with our brothers and sisters back in Africa. We have to become transnational. That's what I preach. That's my word. That's my podcast. That's what I talk about. So it might be a shameless pub, but we have to not be scared to connect back to our homeland where there are millions of people who look like us, right? We have to let them know that we don't need them. Right. And that is the problem that I think historically Black people in America have been forced to do because white people have intentionally divided us. They told Black people in America that Africa is a jungle and they're savages, they're uneducated. But we also told Black colonized countries that Africans Americans are wild, they're thugs, they're violent, they're all these things. So you have Black immigrants who see this perspective and they have this watered down perspective of Black Americans as this hip hop thugs and G's who pull their pants down and they're not taking advantage of what's going on in such a democratic, free country. You should be successful. You should be at the top of the game and you should be the doctors and lawyers that we're trying to be and we're telling our kids to be. Not knowing that this has been systematically put in place to divide us. In order for us to truly be seen, the world, you have to think about it, politically speaking. America cares about what other people think of them.
Trump's our president. We don't care what people think about.
Well, I'm talking about overall. This right here is, the whole Trump era it's been a whole Twilight Zone, bro. But like, and we don't deserve this, but we are getting it right now. But historically, just even all the way back, like every time the world, like when the world looks at America and says, how are y'all the land of the free, but y'all have slaves? Oh, we got rid of the slaves. How are y'all the land of the free, but y'all treat Black people like this? Oh, no, we don't. Look at our civil rights movement, right? Like, so they care about the global, because they do the same thing to other countries. They're the ones telling other countries that you need to free them. We're America, the land of the free, right? And they're the ones that have these slaves in the closet. So we as Black people, I think we need to show them that we can have the best of multiple worlds, right? You have Black people in Germany, you have Black people in London, you have Black people in Ghana, like Nia had mentioned. Once you start to let them know that we can not just connect with each other on a emotional like level and build a brother and sisterhood, but now economically, the majority of the Black doctors that are immigrating to America and all parts of the world, where are they from? They're from Africa, right? Like you have so many Nigerian and Ghanaian doctors, so many Nigerian and Ghanaian businessmen. One of the richest people is Dangote in Nigeria, right? Like you have so many Black, beautiful, intelligent minds that have been drained from Africa. And I'm not telling people we should move back to Africa. I'm telling people that we have the right to go there. We have the right to stay here. We have the right to go anywhere and build with each other so that we can be able to move on and not depend on what white people have to give us. The first thing we need to do, as you had asked already, Ivy, is we need to understand one another first before we can be able to move forward to even, there's so many Black people who are scared to go to Africa, right? We got to start taking them back home to show them the beauty of it. And it's not just safaris of women hanging out with their titties. Like, it's not that, right? But that's the perception that they have. So we have to be able to change. People love Afro beats, but people don't want to go to Africa. People love jollof rice, but don't want to go to Africa yet, right? Like, so we have to change that. You can't just take our culture and capitalize on it. You have to take it and make it part of who you are. And that's what I think we need to do in order for us to be seen. And honestly, bottom line is, fuck that. I don't want to be seen by them. I don't care what they think. I want us to just be able to flourish and have the same rights and benefits to be great as they do.
Definitely agree with what you said. I think the main important thing, no matter how it looks like, is that we have to be unified. The only way we can really be unified is if we draw back to our strengths and where we are in numbers, if you get what I'm trying to say. I think personally, that we should go back to our home bases and, in a sense, become a powerhouse there to be reasoned with and be reckoned with the rest of the world, if you get what I'm trying to say. But I think it all definitely comes from unifying. And I think the whole thing that's been amazing about the BLM movement is that so many people have jumped on the bandwagon, not fully understanding what, everything's about. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, because we're then able to show the world that we're unified in one cause. In that, you start to educate people on certain little things, like what you said about, obviously white people having a quarrel within themselves, but they will stand together to sort out a problem, finish that, and then they come back to what's that? Because if Black Lives Matter everywhere, no matter what you are as a Black person, you will matter. And then we can talk about other differences that we have within ourselves. But the main thing is just to be unified, man.
So today, actually, I had to learn, because I was being very impatient, and I had to learn that when it comes to movements, it's not a 1-year thing. It's not a 5-year thing. Sometimes it's longer than that. And I think that we have been very resilient. And yes, there are times where it's tiring, because we also have to deal with real life at the same time. And that's a lot, So while I am all for the movement and everything like that, I just feel like there's so much with us that needs to be fixed. There's so much trauma. There's so much healing that needs to happen. And we need to really be able to multitask and do both, because I don't think that it's okay to just take half of us to the finish line and then start talking about the homophobia, and then start talking about women, and then this and then that. I feel like we should just be able to multitask at this point and deal with all of these things at the same damn time. When it comes to how that looks like, a lot of you guys have already mentioned that, unity, first of all. I don't know if you guys had that same family structure where there were certain things that were okay for the house, and then they were like, we don't do that outside. We don't talk to people like that outside. We don't do this. All of these things are dealt with in the house. And I feel like Black people need to form their own wealth systems, their own businesses are already there. With that, we need to really discipline ourselves and spend the extra 20 euro on a dress from a Black designer, because our money is the only money that never gets doubled in our community before it leaves. And that is also another thing that contributes to how we are being treated, because people know you guys don't have your own bank. Even in Africa, I think there's only one bank I know that is Black owned, and all the others are Standard Chartered, Bank of the People, but it's not really from the people or for the people. So those are things that we need to, as the new generation, start building towards, start putting funds into those things. And then maybe it would be easier to take these movements as well very seriously if we have something to fall back on as a community. As much as I think that it's great that we are looking at defunding the police in America, we should also be looking at corruption in South Africa. We should also be looking at kidnappings in Lagos. We should really be saying, when we say Black Lives Matter, we should really be saying this is a global problem that Black people are facing regardless of where in the world they are. And we as Black people are going to fix that, and really list down each and every Black person and leave no one behind.
Love that. Keep it coming.
I love that. Yeah, I was going to say, I love that.
You're right about that. I just have to add that you're right about that in regards to, and that just even opened my mind up a little bit, because you're right about the whole, if Black Lives Matter, we're worried about defunding police, but we also have to be worried about the corruption that's happening in our homeland, right? Like if we're preaching going back home and strengthening our relationships with our homelands, then we have to solve those, like Black Lives Matters have to also matter to us with our affairs. And I think the corruption has been, I'm going to blame it on colonialism and what white people have done, where we are now crabs in a barrels fighting for scraps. But you also have to realize that these countries, as Emmanuel mentioned, going back to the homeland, these countries are very young. All those countries in Africa have been liberated in the 50s and 60s, right? So we have to put that in perspective as to how far we have to go and the potential that we have in being able to grow, if we can think about what America was when America was 50 or 60 years old and see where we're at and see what we can do to be more advanced in that, then I think there's hope. But I think that just added to my perspective, because I don't think about that. I'm only thinking Black Lives Matter of what you do to us, but we have to think about what we do within our affairs. I worry though, Tash, when you say multitask, I mean, okay, how do you want us to multitask? I'm not to say we're not capable, but it's so draining. Just even a conversation, the first question Ivy asked, we just spent an hour talking about all the issues that happen in the LGBTQ plus community alone. We haven't even talked about Black men, Black women issues. We haven't even talked about that. It takes a lot of energy to be able to just figure it out. And then what also makes it worse is that then people get frustrated and we don't know how to just communicate and be able to we don't know how to take rejection or take things that don't sit well with us. And then we retort to violence, right? So even if a sister tells us that, she don't like this, or a dude does something, we don't know how to just process it anymore. So we can't properly multitask, because the multitasking to me involves us killing each other. And then we look back and be like, oh, damn, I shouldn't have done that. But we do. That's the part that scares me when you mention that. And that's why I felt a little uneasy when you mentioned that, because I'm like, that also means now we're killing each other again. And that scares me.
No, I get you. I feel like, I hate it when people say it to me, but, not doing anything gets nothing done. As a person who loves to procrastinate, I'm like, nah, don't tell me none of that. But I also feel like that is something that we need to learn. Even if it does include, sorry to say, even if it does include war, there are some places that cannot be healed before a quote unquote cleansing happens. And I feel like whatever that looks like, we need to give ourselves that time to allow it to happen and to figure it out as a Black race, because every other race has been able to do it. Everywhere in history where you look, the Greeks have had their own little war and figured their shit out. Every other place has had that. And Black people, we haven't even been given the platform to voice these things out. The most of the voicing that would ever happen when it comes to Black communities, how about Black on Black crime? But that's the most that people have given us space to do. By multitasking, I really do mean, yes, as much as today I'm healing, tomorrow I might slap a bitch. That's just how it is. It's just how reality is like, and as much as I'm going to be all spiritual and all of that, I don't know how I feel later on today. And I feel like we are the only race that has never been given the space to feel and to just say, and to actually just say without anyone already pointing their fingers and ready to answer, So I feel like when I say multitask, I really do mean that shit. It's not going to be an easy route at all, but it's a very necessary one. And Tash for president. Okay.
I'm with it. That's the president. Yeah, let's go.
I think I definitely will vote. I think that we lack leadership. The big difference between our movement now and the civil rights movement is they had Martin Luther King, they had John Lewis, they had Jose, they had all of these people. So it was like, okay, well, hell, Martin, you done got arrested last week, so we're going to take it now. We're going to do this part. Or they had different people to handle different things. Like y'all previously mentioned, the Black Lives Matter movement was started by 2 lesbian Black women. I don't even know their names or their faces. So it's like, who are the leaders? Who are we looking to say, okay, on every single Tuesday, we're going to buy Black? And then people commit to it. Where is the voices? And like, how people were saying it's not lasting long and the marches are only lasting a week or whatever. Reverend John Lewis, he did this for his entire life. Angela Davis, this has been their entire lives. They didn't give up. So who are we falling back on? Please don't say Reverend Al Sharpton, because no, man.
God, girl, no.
Please no.
No.
So that's why it's just like, who do we have? Who are we looking to? Who is helping us? Who's guiding us? And once we find that person, then we have our direction. Then we can say, okay, this is exactly what we stand for. This is exactly what we're tackling this week. And I know you were saying, I do agree. We shouldn't wait until the finish line to figure out our issues. You're absolutely right there. And so for me, it's like you take these conversations and you figure out how you can change that in your community. You figure out who you can reach with what you have to offer. And I think that when we start to become uncomfortable, when we start this healing process, boom, you didn't heal somebody else. Now you're raising your nieces and your nephews and your siblings to believe different things, or you're going to your job, or you're creating all of these programs and stuff like that. So I don't think that anything should be minimalized.
Do y'all think this is what Obama was supposed to be doing for us? Because I personally believe he was the next leader that we was looking for, and he kind of dropped the ball on
We only thought he was going to be a leader because he was Black. That was it. We just thought that he was going to be the voice for the people because of his skin color. We didn't.
Yeah, but that's also a thing that I've never quite understood. Presidents are not exactly making rules and going by everything on their own, you know. So as much as they are elected and all of that, you can't expect one person to really bring about a whole lot of stuff because they're not the one who's even deciding on those stuff. They're just the face of the decision, really, which is why I am pro making everyone hold your damn self accountable. You know, do your part. If that means meeting up with 10 Black kids and helping them with their math homework once a week, then that's what you're contributing. Everyone should have their task. Everyone knows what their strengths are, but everyone needs to look at themselves as an organization and see what is it that exactly that I need. Okay, I need the financial support for this and this to work. Who can I contact? Who is Black and can help us, you know, get Black money into this business? You know, things like that. Having these conversations as well plays a very big part. Having uncomfortable conversations. In the same way that we want to educate other people about our race, we should also be able to call out our own people. Call out your mother, call out your uncle, and say, listen, this is a different time and a different day, and we just don't say that anymore. So it's things like that that really need to be taken seriously. And I know how easy it is to just relax because it's not fun also to be the person who's always like, excuse me, not that. It's not a nice thing to be the party pooper, but it's worse to be sitting in there and feeling uncomfortable from what you've heard and not saying a thing. I feel like for me, that always ruins my night more, that I just sat there and I didn't do anything. In every space that we are in, we have to really be like, okay, you know what? Fine, there's a bit of homophobia happening in the house, you know, in my own household. What am I going to do about that? For one, when my relatives come here, they have no space in saying anything homophobic because even my grandma will be like, you know that one, she's a defender of the gays. And I'm like, yes, ma'am, I am. You know, so it's things like that. I feel like, first of all, in our houses, we should start there. And then we should start looking at our communities. What is it that I can do for my community? Who can help me with my community? And then from there, we move on to the state, to a city, to, you know, and keep growing as we go along. And always just having the uncomfortable conversations. They're not just going to go away because we didn't say anything. We have to talk about them. We have to share perspectives. That's the only way we as Black people can learn and we can grow. We can only grow from learning.
I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think the whole idea, going back to Aaron's point, I think we don't need to, in my opinion, I think we put too much pressure and dependency on having to have that one Black face to be the leader of all Black people. And I think you have, because then that means that we are depending on waiting for that one extraordinary Negro to be the one who is the one that's going to change the entire game. When, as Tash mentioned, I believe in that school of holding your damn self accountable. And not to say that we can't hold each other accountable, but I believe that we all have different skills, talents, and strengths that we can use in order to continue to build the foundations of our community. And when we start to look into, you do have those leaders that I think a lot of leaders exist now. You know, they don't have that platform, or they're not put on the main screen anymore because the Black agenda is no longer what it was in the 60s. Right now, we have so many different things. There's actually a book about it, but I talk about books all the time. But But there's also this, you have this different divide that's happening among Black people. You got to worry about mixed people. They got their issues. You got to worry about immigrant Black issues. You still got to worry about, you got to worry about poor Black people's issues. You got to worry about rich Black people's issues. So there's so many things that we have to, there's so many issues that we can have a leader for. And even back then, when we talk about the Malcolms and the Martin Luther Kings, they all had, even further back, Marcus Garvey, W.B. Du Bois, we had different Black leaders who were pushing different agendas. I don't think that's changed. I think now it's just that we're no longer just rallying behind it because there's so much information now. The internet, if there's one Black leader like Martin Luther King, we put him on this pedestal, and rightfully so. John Lewis, RIP to him. But we now have the internet where you have somebody, people on Twitter better than the FBI when it comes to finding out information. There's one person who'll put some shit out on a leader or somebody that they did because they were human beings and they make mistakes, but it doesn't matter. They put something out there that they must have said 20 years ago, and they're canceled. Cancel culture is, for better or worse, it does play a role too when it comes to our Black leadership. Like a good person that people talk about all the time in America is a person named Shaun King. He does a lot of work globally as far as, fighting against systemic racism and the murders of Black men. But you go and there's the same Black people that have so much information about him being this thief and he's stealing people's money and all these things. But then you go back and look at the stats. He's done a lot more as far as being able to hold police officers accountable and criminals compared to what Al Sharpton has done or Jesse Jackson, right? But we put too much pressure on having to depend on them. We can do it for ourselves. Remember, as you said, like a president is meant to be able to represent the country's interests. We have to be able to make our interests known, and it has to be consistent. And I think once we do that, from the household all the way up to the government, to the schools, then I think that will change, because I don't want to go out of my way and say that there aren't white people who aren't more invested in making sure Black Lives Matter compared to some Black people. There are white people who have died for this cause, right? And we have to acknowledge that. Although we do understand that racism is real and there's a lot of systemic things and privileges in place, it doesn't have to be a Black person per se that has to change the face of the world. We have to be able to make our interests known as a community. That interest is what is going to be an embodiment of that person who stands before us and expresses it. We need to make it known. Once we're able to unify and let our intentions be known, then I think somebody can speak. But if Barack Obama was to come back and say, Black people, what do you want? Bro, I ain't listening to you, half Muslim. I'm a Christian man. Like, well, think about that. I'm just spitballing, but when you try to come back to the people and talk to them, you got so much division and people looking at you up and down and sideways. We have to shed that type of attitude and come together and figure out, like I talked about, our priorities. And then we need to channel it into someone who we believe has the ability as a leader to be able to represent us. Once we get to that, then we can start having policy changes. But until then, we just continue to have the same type of spurts and die and spurt and die again. So that's where I'm at with it.
My final thoughts, this was another great segment to participate in. It's always great to talk to other people that are like-minded. It's always great to learn from members of other countries. So it's very insightful and it's very powerful. So again, like I always say, continue to do what you're doing because it makes a difference. Take what we talked about today and plant the seeds. Don't just let it just be a conversation and then, okay, let me go continue the rest of my day, put my phone on the charger. That was good. That was nice. No, take the seeds, plant the seeds in our community, plant the seeds in our home, and watch it grow. Continue to build, continue to create Black wealth. Just be great. We gonna figure it out one day, but it does start with us. So I'm grateful to be a part of the generation that recognizes the change and wants to do something about it.
I really enjoyed being on this podcast, and it was really insightful. It was very nice seeing how different people who's outside of America view what's going on in America, and how everybody's Black is similarly facing the same type of change and same type of difficulties all around the world. Like Nia said, the one thing that I do encourage everybody to do is take this group chat and involve it in your everyday lives. Buy Black, vote Black. Anything that you can do Black, do it Black and do it unapologetically.
I learned a whole lot today. I'm just grateful that Ivy made this possible for us to talk about all of these issues that we're all facing all around the world. Yeah, there's not a lot to add on to this. Like Erin said, be Black as proud as you can.
No, I actually don't have anything else to say. I feel like I kind of said everything that needs to be said. Buy Black, order Black, like Erin said. Everything that you could do Black, do it. And also, I feel like also, as much as we are in the movement, also take some time for yourself. Can't pour from an empty cup. So as much as, yes, we are on this every day and dealing with this every day, still take some time for you, heal you, because you can't heal other people unless you are somewhere on that healing trail.
I think that we have the most power out of everyone, and I mean that as Black people, I mean that as people in general. We have so much power. If we only knew the power that we had, we'd be able to do anything. I mean, all we have to do is say no. If we say no, everything will start to fall down, If we look even into music, right, Black culture is embedded in every single little pocket of society. And the Western culture is almost nearly based on Black culture, music, fashion, TV. A load of it is based on Black culture. What we get is from Black culture. And I would even say people like rappers and influencers, I would label as modern day prophet, but they don't want us to know this, They get information, Me, I believe in God, I believe that we get a lot of inspiration and messages from God. And I feel that is put into what I'll call modern day prophets, rappers, influencers. They bring this message. I think that if we unite together, as much as we talk about racism and we do all these sort of things, sometimes we need to just say no. They need you. They need us more than we need them, is the message that I want to leave you guys with. And, it's not about we want to abolish racism. We don't want to abolish white people. So include everyone into the conversation. Everyone has just as much power as each other. And if we're going to uplift the Black community, we need to also, we can only do that together. And that means white, Black, Asian, we all need to do that together, because racism is a minority mindset. We are the majority, we are the people, and we need to remember that. They want us to believe otherwise. We can't allow ourselves to think that way. Otherwise, we will become what we hate the most.
I like that.
First and foremost, I want to thank you, Ivy, for having me on again, despite the fact that I talk too much. I apologize for that, but I get very passionate about these topics. And obviously, it's a very spirited conversation with really great people and very inspirational people that I'm fortunate to be able to get to interact with. And I hope that I can interact with you all moving forward. My final thoughts are that along the same vein as what Mr. Strange mentioned, is that we have to understand our power. And I think, the questions, I'll leave it to rhetorical questions, which is one, you have to think about, why go all through this? White people or whoever you think are the oppressors go through so much to create such an elaborative system to oppress us. What does that say about us and our potential? Why are you so worried about it that you had to create something so elaborate? Like, what are you so insecure about that made you feel like you had to do this to hold us? The fact that we still, for Black people who were involuntarily made as slaves in America, 400 years plus, we're still here. There have been so many theories that have been made about Black people. We're animals. We are from the jungle. We aren't going to live long. We are only good for physical labor. We're not smart enough. And if we are smart enough, we're extraordinary. We're hypersexualized. They've done so many things. They even said we weren't going to live forever. We're endangered species. They've lynched us, right? They've done so many things to us, and we still here, thriving. We're still used as one of the biggest disposable gadgets of all time. You have to realize that, as mentioned already, we have built this entire world through the backs of our ancestors all over the world, because slaves were everywhere, not just America, right? Like, they were slaves everywhere in parts of Europe and everything. So what does that say about us and what we can be if they created so many boundaries to try to keep us within? And we're still fighting. And we know that history shows that when Black people come together and push for something, we always win. We're undefeated. The only people that beat us is ourselves, right? So we have to understand that as well. And then the other question that I want you all to think about is, if this whole world, God forbid, because I'm thinking about Beirut, praying for them, but if this whole world was to start over, something happened and we had to restart our economy again, an apocalypse happened or something, and knowing what we know now from back then, and we had to restart the world, who do you think would thrive? Like, which race do you think would really thrive? Which has the talent, the persistence, the resilience, the intelligence, the physical fitness to be able to rebuild this world again? We have to think about our potential and know that no matter how hard we're trying, as Nia mentioned, planting the seeds, they're out there. These racists are out there working just as hard as we are right now. The documents, the conversation, these podcasts and conversations, they're having the same thing, persisting their own racist ideas, right? So we have to know that they're working just as hard to continue to keep us down as we're working hard to not stay down. So we can't stop. Can't stop, won't stop, bad boys, baby. Like, that's, the P. Diddy motto, but it's true. We cannot afford ourselves to stop. And we can't be afraid to bridge out and go see what's being said outside of our comfort zone, because right now we are all preaching to the choir, but you go out there and you see what they're saying in places where we're not there, and you start to really see that it's still very much so alive and well. So we can't afford to stop. We have to continue to do this. We have to continue to rely on one another, trust in one another, be okay to process the fact that we don't always have to live the same lives because we're human. We make mistakes. We need to take those personal breaks as mentioned and take care of ourselves. We need to laugh at some funny jokes and not be worried about whether it's woke or not, and understand that it's not only about that. We have more to offer the world. So I thank you for the platform and just allow me to be able to passionately speak my truth. And I hope that we can do this again in the near future in a better state than we are in right now.
Well, Thank you guys so much for coming on board. I really do appreciate you guys. I've learned a lot of things today that have opened up my mind, especially you, Tash. I would definitely be voting for you. So run for president in Germany.
Give me the coins. Give me the coins. I don't want no votes. Money.
Both. But this is very insightful, and I do appreciate you guys for coming on board.
Bye.